You're listening to Sweet Life, the show that helps you find and walk your own special path. I'm Brooke Peterson. Here on Sweet Life, we like to explore unconventional career possibilities, self-discovery, professional development, and more. Whatever helps and whatever works to make it sweet. In all of us, there is a hunger, marrow deep, to know our heritage, to know who we are and where we come from. Without this enriching knowledge, there is a hollow yearning. No matter what our attainments in life, there is still a vacuum, an emptiness, and the most disquieting loneliness. And that was spoken by Alex Haley, who is the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Roots. So if anybody might know about knowing their heritage, it might be Alex Haley. So where do you come from? Why does that even matter? Have you ever thought about your ancestors? Who they were, what they did? How much of them is in you today? What if you don't know who your parents are? Does that bother you? It may not bother you, but I bet many people wouldn't say the same. Michelle Ercanbrack has been a family historian for Ancestry.com since 2010. Since graduating from Brigham Young University with a major in family history, her work has included several celebrity connection projects like Kate Middleton's connection to Jane Austen, for instance, and the TV show Who Do You Think You Are? Thank you for joining us from Provo, Utah, Miss Ercanbrack.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what is the difference, or is there a difference, between a family historian and a genealogist?
That's a great question. I honestly think it's a difference between new and old school perspective. Genealogists, in my mind, is someone that is just looking to build their tree as far back and as deep as they can. Family history, I think, reflects a shift in the mentality of the field, which is learning more about the history of families and of individuals and their stories. So I like to consider myself a family historian, but the work that's done is very similar.
And so you have a degree in family history. Is that hard to come by? I had never heard of such a degree.
You know, I was honestly surprised when I heard about it as well. I initially wanted to go into physical therapy. That was my plan. But when I heard someone talk about having a degree in family history, it absolutely piqued my interest. I thought it was just totally fascinating and totally out of the box. And I guess it's all kind of history from there. I know that there are other programs across the United States that do have some type of family history certification. So it's not totally uncommon.
Now, if you go to get a degree in family history, what kinds of classes are you taking?
So a lot of the classes that I took were focused on specific research types. And research types are broken down by geography and by time because the types of records that were created totally differ by time and place. So I took a Midwestern family history course, I took Southern American family history courses, and I took several European, like German and English family history courses.
So why would that be different, Southern family or European?
Well, the types of records that are created totally vary. So, for example, in the American South, most of the records that were created there are land, tax, mainly financially based type records, and a lot of those records were destroyed during the Civil War. And so the way that you research a family in the South, the records that you're looking for, the way you're approaching those records is completely different than the way that you approach family history in England, where they have civil records, church records, records depending on your religion that go back for centuries. So there's a lot more available in England, so the way that you approach the research is a lot different than you would. So it really, not only does it depend on country and language, it even differs at a state level.
Yeah, and like the historical events of that area, like the Civil War, like you said. So, as an example, with records being burned or having a hard time finding reliable, accurate records, where do you go from there? How do you readjust?
Honestly, that's part of what makes it fun. That's part of the challenge is when you are up against a brick wall, when you're researching a family and you seemingly run out of records, what do you do next, and how do you approach it? So it's something that honestly, it's inevitable. It's only a matter of time, regardless of who you're researching or where you'll come to a point where you've hit a dead end. And that's, I think, when you get to use your best thinking and problem solving, is trying to come up with ways to get around that. So things that I like to do is I always research a complete family. I'm always not just looking for an individual, but I'm looking for that individual as a son. Who were his siblings? Who were his parents? Who were his cousins? I'm looking for that individual as a father. Who did he marry? How many times was he married? Who were his children? And by researching that group and that neighborhood, that community as a whole, you usually can you can get around it.
Interesting.
If you are having a hard time finding a record for one person, you might find that piece of information you were looking for in the obituary of his son, or in a census record for his daughter.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you're clearly, this is very, I mean, you might as well be a detective.
Exactly. Honestly, I like to fancy myself a detective sometimes. Yes. Honestly, that's the type of mentality that you have to have. Is it's absolutely a whodunit.
Yeah.
Why did they die? Why did they move? Where did they go? What was going on? And so you're looking at county histories. Was there an economic depression? Was there a big bank crash? Was there a huge city fire? Knowing the history, the geography, the culture, the religion, all these things are really important to know, and helping to give greater context and honestly meaning and value to the research that you're doing.
That's really cool. And I have a flood of questions in my mind all at once, so let me just try to streamline this. First of all, so when you have these documents, and how do you know if you have the right Smith, or if this document is legit or authentic, or how do you know what you're learning is actually true, or do you?
It's interesting that you use how do you know if you have the right Smith, because that's kind of one of those dreaded family history problems when you have a surname that is really common. I feel like all of the projects I've been working on lately are for people in the greater New York City area, which is so highly concentrated. It doesn't matter what your last name is. There are dozens of people with the exact same name.
Right.
And that's a problem where what I do is I create a table and I group people together. So this John Smith is married to a Mary and has 6 kids, and he lives in the Manhattan or like the Bronx area. And this John Smith, he's in Manhattan, but then he moves down to New Jersey, and he never marries. So you have to research all of them and group them together and find unique identifiers that will help you differentiate between them, and then usually there will be a unique identifier that will help you connect to the person that is your ancestor.
Right. Wow. Okay. So now I can see how this could be really interesting, for your own family, and fascinating, sort of piecing together your family history. But what do you get out of it doing this for other people?
Honestly, helping other people learn more about their family history is the absolute best part of my job, which I honestly sometimes takes people by surprise. A lot of people think, well, family history, it's a very personal thing, and so learning more about your ancestors is what gives it power and what gives it purpose and meaning. But for me, being able to help someone make that discovery, being able to help someone fit the pieces of the past together in a way that is meaningful and personal to them today, in the present, 150 years later, it's deep and it's meaningful for me too. And I think it's a common misconception to think that, maybe family history is interesting for specific people, but not for me. You only have to get into it. You only have to try it once, and it's honest. I mean, people call it addicting. It's like a drug where you just can't get enough, because it's so personally powerful and relevant in really surprising ways.
That's fantastic. Well, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break. We are speaking with Michelle Ercanbrack right now. She is a family historian from Ancestry.com, and she is sharing with us what it is all about to be a family historian. You might recognize it as a genealogist, but yeah, so this is Sweet Life. I am Brooke Peterson. We are streaming live from the beautiful campus of Pasadena City College at lancerradio.org. Stay with us. Hello out there, this is Brooke Peterson. Happy Thursday. You're listening to Sweet Life, the weekly show that helps bring you anything that helps and anything that works to make it sweet. We are talking with Michelle Ercanbrack. She is a family historian, and you may be familiar with her. The company she works for, Ancestry.com, I believe is one of the bigger family history companies out there. So, Michelle, where else besides a company like Ancestry.com might a family historian work?
Well, with Ancestry.com, interestingly, we have lots of different departments. So we've got public relations, marketing, content acquisition, document preservation, member services, lots of different departments in cities all over the world. And we actually have family historians in all of those departments. So I think sometimes when you think of a family historian, it calls to mind this image of like a glorified librarian just buried in their books, but that's absolutely not the case. Besides a growing number of commercial family history companies, there are family history research groups and firms. Ancestry.com actually owns a genealogy firm called Progenealogists, which is a team of about 30 to 50 family historians, and they help do a lot of the research for some of our interesting PR campaigns. Some of the examples include connections between Robert Pattinson, who played Edward in Twilight, to Vlad the Impaler, who's the historical
That's brilliant.
inspiration for Dracula.
Yeah.
It is truth is stranger than fiction. They are related. Another connection they've discovered is that Emma Watson, who played Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, had an ancestor that was a Salem witch, a convicted Salem witch. So, in addition to really fascinating family history finds, they also helped provide all of the research for the 3 seasons of Who Do You Think You Are, which was on NBC, which was a really fantastic show. It was Emmy-nominated.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that. Yeah, I saw the one with Rita Wilson. And she went around. That's another thing. Do you travel a lot, or sort of tracking down these leads and following papers? Do you find yourself over in New York City or Europe or wherever?
You know, I have a couple of examples of travel for family history. And the first is actually a personal experience, and it was one of the most powerful family history experiences that I have ever had as a professional researcher. And it happened while I was visiting my family in Omaha, Nebraska. And one of the projects I was working for, or what I was researching, was regarding a family that lived in Iowa. And a quick Google search showed me I was only a couple counties away from where this family lived. And so I had a couple days in town, and I just jumped in the car and drove. I didn't know where I was going. Got lost several times. Had to have this is before I had an iPhone. Right. I had to call my dad and have him give me directions because he was Google mapping it at home. It was completely crazy. But in that one rainy Saturday afternoon, driving around through endless cornfields looking for lost cemeteries, I found more than just a dozen headstones, which that in and of itself is a genealogical gold mine. But I was able to get a glimpse into this family and into what their life was like. You know, it's one thing to read a record about German immigrant farmers in Iowa, which honestly just sounds totally boring. But it's a totally different experience to drive through that area and to imagine the grit and determination it would take to leave Germany and end up in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and stay and raise your family there, and to affect the future of Iowa farming. It was an incredible experience, and I gained a love and appreciation for those people just through driving through cornfields and visiting their cemeteries. So traveling is a really powerful component of family history. The amazing thing, though, is the Internet has absolutely revolutionized the field.
I bet.
And before, you would have to drive to New York to get the specific records that you're looking for. But now with companies like Ancestry.com, Ancestry is the largest online family history resource. They are a repository for 11 billion historical records online, which means you can do the lion's share of all of your family history research at home, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, in between, soccer practice or in your pajamas, just totally at your convenience. And what this has allowed is this totally different aspect of family history travel, which is a family history vacation. You do all your homework at home on Ancestry.com with the convenience of your computer, and then you can go and visit those places in Ireland and not have to spend 2 weeks, locked up in a chapel or in a library. You get to go and find visit the church and go there for the experience, and again to visit those places and to have that journey and emotional experience of walking where they walked.
That's really interesting.
It's this a really amazing, unexpected emotional component that comes when you visit the places where they live.
Well, that was one of my questions for you. And in listening to you talk about your trip to the cornfields, I can picture it. It's just so cinematic, this moment that I feel like you had. And I can totally sort of be there with you. But now, in general, when you're at the computer or at the office or whatever. Well, the bigger question here, let me just get to this, is do you often find yourself somewhat emotionally involved with who you're researching, the family or the people? Does it connect with you that way more so than you might have thought before?
Absolutely. Honestly, I find myself connecting emotionally all the time. And I think that, again, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about as far as the difference between a genealogist and a family historian. Genealogy it calls to mind this very kind of dry academic pursuit, but family history is learning the stories. And stories are powerful. Stories are emotional. And it reminds me of a time we were promoting Who Do You Think You Are? And doing many Who Do You Think You Are experiences for local TV anchors across the nation. And I had the privilege of helping do the research and finding the story for a woman in Cincinnati. And her name and her background and the identity that had been handed down to her was that of her father's heritage, which was very Italian. And so, she grew up hearing stories about Italy and eating the Italian food, and her maiden name was Italian, and so that was very much a part of her identity. But when we looked at her mother's, that maternal line going back, we discovered her great-grandmother was this orphan in Cincinnati. So here's this town that she lived in her whole life. She's this local Cincinnati celebrity. But she has not only a grandmother or a great-grandmother that was an orphan in Cincinnati, but whose heritage was Jewish. And she had absolutely no idea that she had Jewish heritage. And the interesting thing is it didn't take away from what she already knew about herself. It didn't detract or distract from her Italian heritage. It just gave her another piece of the puzzle of her identity. It added to her understanding of herself in a really rich, beautiful way to have this other side, this Jewish heritage that she had no idea about.
Why do you think family history is important? What do you think people get out of it?
I get that question a lot. And I honestly, when you think about those two kind of quintessential human experience questions, which are who am I and where do I come from, family history answers both of those in really resounding ways. And there are even psychologists that are conducting research about the effect of family history. And what they're discovering is it's not just knowing your family history that helps answer those questions, gives you identity. It helps give you strength. They were running this test with adolescents in New York about how does having a family narrative give you strength of character and just help you overcome hardship. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of this study were the attacks on the Twin Towers on September 11th. Mm-hmm. And that really highly traumatic experience just further strengthened their overall conclusion that when you have a strong family narrative, it helps you overcome. And whether your family narrative is good or bad, I think you have to have both. It's a matter of, you know what, maybe my dad was a drunk, but my great-grandfather was an immigrant who left his family and overcame all these hardships to help me have a better life here in America. And it's when you pair the good and the bad, it's this narrative of identity that says we've gone through hard things before and we can do it again.
That sounds really great. And it sounds like a really nice way of spending your time for a person's job.
And honest, I feel very blessed to be able to have this be my job, to have a job in a growing field backed by a passionate community where the result is something that's personal and has lasting value is a lot more than most people can say about their job. But it's not just for the professional. It's something that at a hobby level even is something that is powerful and meaningful to people every day.
And how much nowadays, with all of this, like you said, the boom of this industry, how much is the technological advance of DNA playing into it? And I have to sort of cut this sort of short. So, is DNA changing your field quickly?
Absolutely. DNA coupled with the research, I mean, you get the science and the history that marry together and create a completely dynamic, fascinating experience that is awesome.
Well, thank you so much. We have been talking with Michelle Ercanbrack. She is a family historian from Ancestry.com. I really appreciate them sharing you with me. In the next half of the show, have a great day, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brooke.
You've been listening to Sweet Life. I'm Brooke Peterson. You can like us on Facebook by searching Sweet Life Radio Show. Until next time, make it sweet.